So good afternoon, people. Good morning, wherever you are. Good evening around the world. Welcome to Daily Chaos. Coming up in 5 minutes' time, Bubba Kate Paris joining me today to discuss beggars' belief. Because what do you believe? What do you believe anymore? And how can we believe? How do we know what we can believe in? Or anything? Blimey, I don't know. Very confusing. All right, coming up in 5 minutes. Sorry, destroying it. Oh, blimey. Cancelled Eurovision. Coming up in a couple of minutes, people. Do us a favour, share the show. Blimey, this is dismal. I'll tell you what, I'm about to slash my wrists. Very pretty though. Sorry to destroy it. Blimey. Hold on a sec. Let's have something a bit upbeat just for a sec. Hey folks, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good people. welcome to the daily calamity, catastrophic chaos.
Oh, I like the background, Ollie.
Hey, Bubs.
Hi.
How you doing, girl?
I'm okay, thank you. A
Good,
little bit
good
of a
to see
cold.
you.
Not sure if I'm coming down with the coronavirus. We'll see.
Oh, yeah, probably. Yeah. The show is daily, and the chaos is hourly. By the minute, know what I mean? Or is it? Is it all contrived? I don't know. I don't know what to believe, yeah. Beggars belief. We're going to try and talk through this tonight, yeah. Bubba Kate Paris, me, the Viscount. And you. Oh, blimey. Right, okay. Hey, Bubba, how are you, girl? How you doing? Bubba Kate Paris,
I'm well,
Katie Fanning.
Ollie, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Yeah, day 4 in quarantine here in Valencia, Spain, and kind of, beginning to think about crawling up the walls, but not quite.
Really?
Yeah,
It's
going
not that bad.
taking the
Learn a foreign
organics
language.
out.
Read a book.
Hey, Bubs, sorry.
Learn a foreign language. Read a book. Do
Well,
more online criticism of governments and everything. Just take more time to think, to relax.
Yeah, no,
Turn
sure.
Turn off all your Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'll tell you, the highlight of my day at the moment, I swept the patio today. Yeah, that was the highlight of my day. I swept the patio. I mopped it. I spent an hour doing it. It was just nice to be outside. One of the highlights is taking the organics or the bottles or the plastics out. Going shopping. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. All of that. Apart from the fact you got to kind of mask up, wear the gloves, put on the old, I don't know, KY, whatever it is. Oh,
where would we get masks from in the UK? I ordered some from Amazon at the beginning of February, just in case. It's better to have things and not need them than need them and not have them. So I ordered them, and they've been on dispatch for ages. So I've got a slight feeling that they may have been seized, for medical use, and that's fair enough if people are more needing of them. But if it becomes necessary that we wear them, like in other countries where it's mandatory that you wear a face mask if you go out shopping, how are they going to become available to citizens for us to be able to go out shopping? How have they made them available there, Ollie?
I picked them up at the DIY store.
Oh, right, okay.
But
yeah.
I do a lot of carpentry and stuff like that. I've reformed a couple of flats and things, and I enjoy all that. So I normally have a few masks in, and I've got some of these big kind of industrial ones with the, kind of like World War II type stuff for heavy grinding off metal and stuff like that. But
I've seen them. They actually protect quite well. There's a particular,
they do.
What could you call it, tog?
But you look like a moron. I mean, where do you draw the line? Actually, though, the reason to wear a mask isn't so much to protect yourself. It's to protect other people. If you get it, you should absolutely be wearing a mask.
You, that's all. I said this to the dentist once because I went in and I had a bit of a cough, and it was well before coronavirus. And I said to them, look, I think I might be coming down with a chest infection. They said, oh, no, it's fine. And then I said something about one of them wearing the masks, and they said, well, they don't actually protect us. They protect you from us, breathing into your mouth, but they're quite ineffective the other way around. The ones that you're on about, the ones you get from DIY stores that stop from chemicals and they fit quite closely. Most of them have a respirator on. They'd work. But if there's any sort of gaps, viruses are microscopic. So they can get through very, very small gaps. And this is
They certainly can. Absolutely. That's right. I've seen people walking around with scarves wrapped around their heads kind of like this. And I don't think that's going to do anything at all.
If somebody is directly coughing and you've covered your face, you may, but it gets in through your eyes, your ears. It's near enough impossible. I've today, because I thought, oh well, I seem to be getting a bit of sniffles and I've got a bit of a dry cough. I don't feel unwell. I'm probably going to quarantine myself now for a few days, cancel all my gym and everything else, because before I was perfectly healthy and it wasn't mandatory. But if if there's any chance of me becoming ill, then you've got to stay in, haven't you? But I live with somebody, and I don't want them getting. So I was going around disinfecting everything. You're thinking, well, what now? Just this. I need to disinfect. And you're just thinking, this is bloody impossible if you think about it. I mean, you can do your very best, but at some point with a virus like this, everybody's going to get infected. I don't think, when they go on about, herd immunity, like Boris has been saying, that just is the natural evolution of a virus as it goes along through, as it infects people. I mean, obviously it'll infect in our first wave. It usually mutates, comes back, and there's a second wave. It's usually worse in the second wave. But keeping these people at home is, once people have got a certain immunity, I think they're thinking that they can synthesize some sort of a vaccine from that. And that's what they're hoping, because, they need to find something. But
I've read also, just to give a more positive spin on the mutation concern, I read earlier that chief medical whatnot, Whitby or something, not Welby, he's the Archbishop of Canterbury, isn't he? Bloody useless bloke. That bloke who's, in charge of the whole coronavirus task force in the UK, he said that when it mutates, actually it can mutate into something less dangerous. And they are wondering if the mutation that has taken place has been less dangerous than the original. I don't know the truth of it. I don't know what to believe. I mean, a lot of people in Italy have died, apparently, because of this. Yes. And in fact, 475 in the last 24 hours. But apparently, now again, I don't know what to believe, which is the purpose of this show really today, to try and knock our heads against a wall here and try and work this out. Apparently, the average age is 81 of the people that have died. So have they really died of coronavirus, or I don't know. I don't know how they test for it. I don't know anything. But the chief medical bloke, Bubs, just a sec, darling. The chief medical bloke, he did say that when it mutates, actually, it's not necessarily a terrible, terrible thing. So I think that we need to maybe be a little bit less fearful than we have been. No?
I don't think it's a matter of being fearful. I think you can look at things in a, what people would say is a negative manner, but it's a realistic manner. It's not from a position of fear. It's about calculating the worst case scenarios and taking them into perspective and thinking, right, well, if this does happen and the worst does happen, what are we going to do to be prepared for that, so that we can be prepared for that eventuality, the things that we can control, because we can't control it mutating. It might turn into something less deadly. It might turn into something more deadly, like it did with the Spanish flu.
Hold on. You're being racist. You're calling it the Spanish flu. Oh, you can't do that. We're not allowed to call it the China flu, are we? Or the Kung flu, or whatever. Whoa. Oh, it's certainly not if you're President Trump. Oh, no. Hillary Clinton said not. So did CNN. Having called it the China flu themselves.
And the China flu. And I don't call it that. I call it COVID-19. But, Spanish flu is just commonly what people know what the pandemic in 1918
It came out of China. Actually, the Spanish flu didn't come out of Spain, apparently. So I've heard.
It didn't, no. There's a few conflicting theories on where it actually originated. There's one that said that it originated in workhouses in China again. But the first case of Spanish flu was actually reported on a military base in Kansas. And they backtracked it to cases, other people that they found that had been infected before, but it wasn't reported, from a farm in Massachusetts that was, they had both poultry and pigs. And what happened was a form of avian flu somehow infected the pigs that were also infected with some form of human flu, and that mutated and infected the humans. And it's a matter of numbers and probability when it comes to infectious disease, when it naturally occurs, or new emerging infectious diseases anyway, because as they evolve, most of the time, viruses, they might not mutate into something dangerous, or they might not mutate into something that's highly infectious amongst humans. It might not be airborne, for instance. It might need, bodily fluids, or it might be really, really difficult to pass on. That was the case with avian flu, which actually killed up to 50-60% of the people that it infects. That's the H5N1 virus.
Yeah,
and that is
also came out of China. These things tend to come out of China, eh? A lot of them have.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, you've got Middle Eastern
just saying.
respiratory syndrome, and that mainly comes obviously from Middle East. Saudi Arabia has had a major problem with it. In fact, I would say like a mini pandemic of their own in the Middle East, and they get that from direct contact with camels. But it's very difficult.
Really,
to
direct contact with camels. Blimey,
it comes from camels, that the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome.
Right.
But yeah, that's very difficult to transmit from human to human. The problem with the COVID-19 is that it is highly infectious. I mean, its death rate, at the moment, people are saying it's less than flu, but if you look at the percentages of people it infects to that many it kills, it's the infection rate is much higher. So even if the death rate is lower, more people are going to get it, which means it's going to equal out and become something similar to an influenza pandemic, which they weren't expecting. They have protocols in this country specifically for influenza that they don't have for other deadly infectious diseases. Influenza is in its own category. This isn't an influenza. So they didn't treat it as such, even though it is mimicking very much like an influenza would do and will follow the same statistical patterns of mobility.
Well, it's a kind of a cousin, isn't it? It's a member of the coronavirus family, but it seems to be considerably more infectious, but with a far lower mortality rate. Actually,
if you're fit and healthy.
I don't know.
You're less likely to die, but there are cases of quite. See what I mean? Have younger people that are becoming quite unwell. Have you seen that video circulating on Facebook? It's of a woman, and she's in a hospital in Great Britain, and she's saying to people, just don't take any chances. Smokers, stop smoking. All of these things. And she's got full-blown pneumonia. She's in intensive care. She's obviously going to live. She's getting better, and she's getting the care that she needs. However, if there is a lot of people that are really sick at that point in time, it's a matter of doctors are going to have to make very serious decisions on, they've got a lot of very elderly people and very, very sick people that are going to be in need of, intensive care and respirators. But then they also might have a portion of reasonably healthy young adults that, will get a worse effect or worse symptoms, or they're saying there is a worse strain. There's almost like two strains, a less severe strain and a more severe strain. And they might also be in need of those beds. And do they say, right, well, the elderly are like in their 80s, this woman's 30 odd and she's got 2 kids, so she gets the respirator. Doctors are going to have to make difficult decisions.
These are
like that.
tough choices coming up. The problem is that this is a new virus, and so it's kind of it's cutting a swathe through the human race, if you like, very, very fast, in a way that flu doesn't do so much, I suppose, because we have built up more immunity to that. With this, we've got none as of yet. Some of us do now, but there's so much we don't know about it. But look, let's not get into stuff that we don't know, and let's instead talk about stuff that we don't know, because the problem is that we don't know much, and we're being told by the mainstream media what we should and should not be thinking when they don't know either. And so I wanted to kind of discuss this today with you, and to try and separate and to find out if we're being played here also a little bit.
Well,
and we've got Jay. Just a sec, Bubs. Just a sec. We've got Jay Carey popped in as well. I think he's going to join in with this conversation. But my first question to you, Bubs, because I saw you online the other day talking about this, and you were saying that you believe that this was from one of those biowarfare laboratories in Wuhan. Now, is that correct? And if so, does that not make you one of these terrible conspiracy theorists, according to the mainstream media?
Yeah. I would say that everything at the moment is up for speculation. I mean, you said that the whole point of this chat is to, sort of bash about all the things that have been said and try and figure out what's truthful. And I think this is sort of a defining point in where we've got to realize that our media and politicians and, especially the mainstream media have become so untrustworthy. And there is so much false information, and people make things up online and they falsify things from the World Health Organization. And there's an awful lot of speculation, and that causes a lot of confusion. I can't even tell you what the facts are. I don't think anybody knows what the facts are. And I think that we've got to stop. We've got to realize that a lot of what is causing this confusion is that a lot of false information is allowed to be printed. And I think that drums up a lot of fear. That's what's leading to an awful lot of the panic buying. And I think people basically, they sell what is their opinion and speculation as fact.
Yeah.
And they don't have that fact. And then people take that honest fact, and sometimes the media run with it, and it causes mass hysteria, and it causes an awful lot of confusion. Now, my theory is that there is the Wuhan Biosafety National Laboratory, and that obviously it's in Wuhan, and that's China's national biosafety laboratory. And the United States,
is that the one just round the corner from the market?
Yeah, it's not very far away, but and America, the United States, actually released a report back in 2002 that stated that they were very, very worried that something may leak from that lab. Now, in 2004, it's now been confirmed, like I say, because all the information we get, even if you try and verify it, other sources might be verifying information that's false. So we never know what's factual in this day and age. It's the age of mass deception, it seems. Anyway, going back to the main point, this laboratory, it was suspected that they had actually leaked the SARS-like virus back in 2004. Luckily, it was reasonably contained, but did get into the animal populations. And they think that this COVID-19 is possibly a mutated, naturally evolved pathogen that was released from a lab. Well, it was originally bioengineered. It got released from a lab and then has evolved within animals, particularly small mammals, bats, mice, something like that. And then they think, similar to Spanish flu, it had a crossover animal that could get infected by both, and then the two viruses mix, they mutate, and they become able to infect humans. And unfortunately, the dice was rolled, like I say, it's a numbers game, that this particular virus happens to be able to be highly infectious, unlike the avian flu outbreak that we saw, and unlike swine flu, that even though that was infectious, it was nothing like this is.
They've all come out of China, these, haven't they? SARS as well, H1N1. I'm sorry, is that racist to point that out? Ebola didn't. Zika didn't.
It might be due to bioengineering and accidents, or it might just be due to, China has a very high population. They don't follow certain environmental standards, and those sort of practices and ways that farming industry and social living is conducted.
Globalization is just doing us proud, isn't it? Great. Yeah, brilliant. Hold on a sec. Just a sec. Just on a point of that. David Vance popped on yesterday. David Vance, well-known online for tangledweb.org, altnewsmedia.net, biased BBC, fantastic bloke. Had a great chat with David yesterday. And he was explaining to us how Italy, the reason that coronavirus became such a big problem there, particularly originally hooked in there, is because in around Milan and Lombardia, that region, loads and loads of Italian families sold their textile companies and what have you to the Chinese about 20 odd years ago. And subsequently, there's been a huge migration of Chinese cheap labor, cheap globalist stuff, going on. 100,000 Chinese, many of whom have Wuhan roots, been traveling to and forth. Guess what? Another thing the media doesn't talk about, because can't be disrupting the profit margin and all of that, That's what it's about as far as the media is concerned. They didn't give a stuff about the truth. Anyway, sorry, just a little rant there, a bit of a side rant. But another good example, Bubs, of where we are just not... It's very hard for people to know what to believe when they're not being given the facts.
That's true. And even when, facts are stated, we're often questioning whether these sources that we used to be able to trust, we used to be able to trust the news. We don't.
Well, we
now.
thought we
very,
could,
very
and
few people, when they hear the
we
news,
did incorrectly.
I'd say some people believe politicians. They don't anymore. Quite often, people have been lied to far too often, and people have, these organizations have been caught out. So who do you turn to now for the truth that you trust? So basically, we all sit here.
This is really the problem, isn't it? Because if what you're saying, if your suggestion is correct, that this thing was released from a laboratory as opposed to some bloke bit the head off a bat, which is, I don't know, I've got no idea whether I could transmit or what, either way. But if it came from a laboratory, the media are telling us not to believe that. There have been articles in the Telegraph, for example, the Bildergraph, whatever you want to call it, telling us that is all conspiratorial stuff. You must not believe it. But on the other hand, they're asking us to trust a Chinese dictatorship with a human rights record which is absolutely atrocious. They run concentration camps, for crying out loud. They're rumoured, I don't know the truth of this, to have organ transplants from some of the folks in those concentration camps, education camps they call them. We're supposed to believe these people that covered up this very epidemic, now a pandemic, that covered up this epidemic from day one for what, 2-3 months, something like that? And then we're supposed to believe them, as opposed to a laboratory release, be it malicious or erroneous, who knows? But this is the problem, isn't it? It's very, very hard to know. But if it's true that this was some kind of laboratory release, if it was deliberate, then everything about this is different. And then we really cannot, because some people at the moment, for example, are trusting that Boris is doing his best by the British, despite that whole Wuhan thing, that whole Huawei deal thing, that 5G thing. Yeah. A lot of people, we want to believe the best, that he is being Chilean and all the rest of it. If it turns out, if it transpires, if it were ever, which it won't, to be proven that this actually was some sort of a laboratory release, malfeasant, then that really, really does tell us that we are in dystopian Orwellian times indeed.
Well, I don't know why people don't think we aren't already in dystopian Orwellian times. I mean, you've got
people are just hoping that this is a natural problem
for expressing opinions. We have suppressed political, I would say violently suppressed political opponents and dissidents in this country, that where powers are abused, where they're thrown in prison, for instance, or where mental health is used to lock them up for extended periods of time and torture them because they can just get away with it. People don't realize there's an awful lot of infringements and dissolvements of their civil liberties and rights and that have been going on over the last decade or two, that's been very much picking up pace, and people seem very, very blinded to it. This is why I'm a bit suspicious.
But we are now in a state. I mean, I am in Spain. People in Italy are. People in France are. It's about to happen in the UK. It's happening in places like San Francisco. We are in a state of soft martial law. You could argue it's martial law because the cops have guns. You could argue it's martial law.
They've already sent in the military. There's 10,000 soldiers in Britain that are on standby. Right. There was reports, one that was sent to me. I mean, it actually comes from this time from last year, where exactly this time last year, in fact, where there was a combined European military exercise that was practicing for warfare and mass civil unrest across Europe. Weird that, isn't it? 10,000 troops as well. And now they've just released 10,000 troops, apparently British, and onto our streets. particularly to major cities, which will be involved in roadblocks. And apparently, if there is a pandemic, we might be turning some hotels into temporary sort of isolation units or hospitals, which will be mandatory.
Well, that would be necessary.
Is suspected of having virus can be arrested and fined and imprisoned by the police. So there are quite draconian measures that are quite worrying. Now, I understand that they need to take some measures to safeguard vulnerable people from this virus. But to be fair, it's already out there and everybody's going to get it at some point. And obviously the delay method hasn't worked. If they truly wanted to delay it, they should have banned all flights, anybody coming in. We should have quarantined ourselves. We should have safeguarded our citizens by not allowing people from affected areas to come here.
Yes.
As soon as there was a report of an emerging infectious disease.
I agree.
Pathogen.
I've been saying that for 2 months. Since the pictures were coming out of Wuhan with these people locked in there, being barricaded, welded into their flats.
Into their buildings.
Literally. Since we saw those kind of pictures coming out of Wuhan, it seems so clear that there was and basically since they quarantined the capital, Beijing, it seemed a pretty sensible idea to stop flights from China. Anyway, we've got Jay Carey here as well. Jay, you're muted at the moment. If you want to unmute, then I'll pull you into this. I want to hear what you've got to say because you keep sending me lots of fascinating information and I want to find out a bit more about that. Let's take a few comments. Paul Simon Case says, I heard from an American historian that King George, with Parliament and Bank of England, tried to wipe out the Continental Army in America with smallpox. Steve B says, in latest POTUS Trump presser, hydroxychloroquine, they are looking into possibly a variant of the C virus designed as a cure for SARS. He also says that this is a lab-created virus, although how you can be sure of that, Steve B, I'd be interested to know. Because I don't see how anybody can be sure of anything much at all, to be honest with you. Mookie Puck says that he watched a bit earlier of, I think, Boris Johnson addressing the nation. But I don't know. They're having a conversation between themselves. Let's see what they're saying. That was on YouTube. Let's see a bit of what folks are saying on Facebook as well, seeing as we haven't been banned from there. Amazingly, I haven't had a shadow ban from Facebook in about 2 weeks. Incredible. God bless you, Nick Clegg. Thanks for that. Appreciated. Yazed says, I went on the bog roll hunt after work today again, and I'm now stocking up on newspapers, which is all they're good for. Mark Singer says, followed you both for a long time. Great to see you butting heads. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark Singer. I think that's a compliment to you as well, Bub. Sue Dacey says, is the lady standing behind Ollie signing for the show? Okay, all right, right. And Kathy Farrell says they had at Aldi today, Armin. She's talking to Armin Yazid, and they sold out of bog rolls in 10 minutes. They were walking out with trolleys full again. I thought, Bubs, that they had stopped. That they somehow had stopped this hoarding the supermarkets.
Well, I actually went out today because I thought, it's quite likely by tomorrow we might be going on to similar measures as Spain and Italy. And on top of that, like I say, I've started to get a little bit of sniffles and a cough. So I thought, right, well, I'm probably going to have to self-isolate. So I went out to go get some things. And I have an Aldi not very far away from me. Then there's a Tesco and then a Sainsbury's, all in varying distances. Aldi's first, then Tesco, then Sainsbury's. And Aldi actually had just restocked near enough when I got there. Apparently they'd actually, that's what I thought, but apparently they'd actually restocked at about 8-9 in the morning. And they still had things at lunchtime. So I managed to pick up blue rolls. Not horrific amounts. I've got 6 rolls. I don't think you're going to need more than that for 2 weeks. Hopefully it won't last more than 2 weeks that we've got to be on lockdown. Jesus Christ.
I'll tell you what. It's going to last a lot longer than that. It's going to be. I think it's going to be at least 2-3 months in Spain. And in the UK, because it's wetter and a bit colder, I think it's going to be longer. And the thing is that the danger is that now we can counter this argument in a minute, because there's another way of looking at it. But the danger is that they quarantine everybody for a little while, get this thing basically under control, then relax the quarantine, but then the thing, blows up again. And so they actually need to...
It's going to blow up at some point. All they can do is get the medical equipment and the NHS ready. As long as they've got enough respirators for the people that are going to need ICU, because most people are not going to need it, but for the percentage, which will be reasonably large,
ICU?
that are going to need it, they need to be prepared for. And that's why they're trying to stagger this out. And that's why they want a certain amount of us to have immunity, because if there is a second wave and it hasn't mutated, it's just a second wave of the same virus, they want some of us to be immune. But regardless, now it's in the human populations, in the numbers that it is, everybody is going to get it at some stage. Your survival, if you're one of the people that is in a risk group that is more likely to contract the more serious symptoms of this virus, like pneumonia, like the convulsions, that is going to need putting in the ICU unit, we just need enough capacity to service all of them. And the main worry is that it is infecting people at such high rates that there is not going to be the capacity to be able to fulfill that need. People are going to die because of it. So the government's main strategy, now that herd immunity is pretty much, it's guaranteed, that strategy, that they want to stagger it out. So we want a first wave of people infected, then a second wave of people infected. So everybody's going to get infected at some point. We just want less and less people to be infected at any one particular time. So instead of everybody all being infected within 1 month, and the whole 80% of the population, and a good 10 to 20% of them need hospitalizing, even if it's numbers less than that, there are nowhere near enough beds. So what they prefer is, let's say, 10% of the population is infected at any given time, and 3% of them are needed, are required in the ICU unit. And then hopefully they have sufficient resources to fulfill that need. And that's what the strategy seems to be.
So this is basically that pushing the bump down so that it's a longer ride, but it basically allows the NHS to cope. That's basically, so you agree. You agree that you think that Boris's strategy is basically right, do you?
Well, it's the only thing they can do at this point.
What they're doing in Spain and Italy is they're quarantining the entire population to try to,
how long are they going to quarantine you for? Do they know the lifespan of this virus? Do they know if it stays dormant in people's systems and then reoccurs? They don't know any of this. So keeping you on quarantine for huge amounts of time might be pointless in the first place. I think that the UK, in comparison to not having everybody locked down all at once, is in some ways what they're saying about getting people infected. But let's say the healthier ones right now, the ones that are more likely to survive, if most of them go through it now and build up immunity, they're out the way. A small amount of them might get infected. That's fine. We have enough ICU units for that small amount of reasonably healthy
intensive care units.
Yeah. The next wave, when they let all the old people out after a couple of months, or, the ones that get restless, because remember, this is Great Britain. We don't have great police. Do you really think they're going to be able to enforce a quarantine of all people in that? People will get restless. People will go out. People
I don't know. As you say, Boris is drafting in the army, certainly in London, at least. I mean, London could be... I wonder what's going to happen in London. Because London it's not exactly stiff upper lip, have a cup of tea, keep calm and carry on type of a demographic anymore, is it? I wonder, having seen some of these videos with folks fighting in the shops, what London is going to be like. I really, really do wonder. And I suspect that one of the reasons why Boris doesn't want to lock down London is because they're concerned about that. But they are talking about putting troops outside of supermarkets in London.
I think that would be a wise move, to be fair. I'm not a big fan of eroding people's civil liberties or having the military come and interfering with the general populace. But, London does have a population that is more likely demographically to spiral into civil unrest. And that won't be due to frustrations. It will be because it's opportunistic. I mean, I saw the riots in 2011, and a lot of that wasn't about that drug dealer that got shot that they all cared about. It was all about, hey, look, the police actually can't cope with all this. It was a load of teenage lads running around with their faces covered, smashing their way into JD Sports to go rob themselves a pair of trainers. That's what it was. But you get grown adults that are really pissed off that want to go rob banks, jewelry stores, high value end things, people that want to take out vendettas on each other, people that just want to go out and take advantage of the lawlessness. I mean, I think that Britain, and I do think that this is due to the mass migration and a loss of our cultural identity, that we no longer have this keep calm and carry on. And very often we've lost touch with our communities. We don't look after each other in the same way that we used to. And we especially don't have that same sort of community spirit where everybody pulled together and, shared and rationed what there was, like during the war, where people, there was a picture that I saw the other day, and it was a woman who was sat on top of the rubble of a broken house that had been bombed out in the Blitz, and she'd lost everything. And if she, I can imagine that she'd probably had sons or a husband. He's probably been sent off to war and died. And she sat there having a cup of tea. And you see another picture, and it's of a full-grown male going mad with all these shopping bags in his hand full of loo rolls and breads, trying to punch an old lady in the face for the last, box of fucking cereal. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. It's a bit early for that.
No, you shouldn't.
But
nope.
It is ridiculous.
This is a family show, despite the subject matter. Carry on.
It comes out occasionally. It does wind me up. I mean, I'm sorry to take. Like I said, I did a bit of shopping. I went to Aldi. Aldi had stuff. That was great. There's particular soups that I wanted. There was a butternut squash and chili and broad bean soup. It's great, and it's got lime in it. Anyway, I wanted to get that. And anyway, I went to Tesco, and it was quite empty. And there's this old woman that was wandering around with an empty basket, and she's down the far end of the store, so she's gone through quite a bit of it because there's only one entrance and it's on the other end. And she did look a bit confused and upset, and she just had nothing in a basket, and she's just staring at the empty shelves. And then she was staring at this man, and he was a big Asian dude, and he had a shopping trolley, and it was all full of milk. That stuff that's sort of in the cartons that's long life. And apparently she buys that all the time because she doesn't drink a lot of milk, and she wants to stock up on it, and she's quite upset that this guy had so much of it. I went over and asked the guy if we could take some and explained who it was for, and he actually he gave it to me with no issues. So people can be reasonable if you explain the situation. I told him that it was unlikely that the staff would let him check out with that much of one product anyway, and that he was depriving an old lady of it, and would he be kind enough to give us some, and he did.
Yeah.
But
and that's just the elderly lady that you saw. I mean, people should not be doing that. It is just out of order.
It's not nice to see. No, I mean, I sometimes you think, oh well, I'll be perfectly fine no matter what happens. Even if civil unrest comes, I'm sure I'll be perfectly capable of dealing with it. But there are a lot of people that seem to be really suffering right now with extreme anxiety. They're very worried for the future. I mean, I was out, obviously I'd been to the gym, and I went for a massage the other day, and I was talking to the woman who was my masseuse. She also worked at Manchester Airport for an agency, and it's a 0 hours contract. Apparently Manchester Airport, a lot of their staff are agency workers, and it's 0 hours. And she lost her job, and now her second sort of part-time job, which she does to keep herself afloat, is all that her income is, and that's the massages. And most of her clients are cancelling, even though they're taking every precaution to keep that place clean, and they're really worried about their livelihoods, their business. She's got rent to pay, she's got kids, she's a single mum, and I just felt so bad for her. And it's the same with the people in the gym, and I know some of the places where I go for lunch, and they're really, really struggling, and they're saying we can probably cope with a few weeks, maybe a month of this, but we can't have this go on for long periods. And I know the government have announced today that they'll do what they can for relief, but it's this wider impact of what it seems to be having on people, and this whole fear and confusion. This is why, like I say, one of the most important issues about this pandemic that needs to be raised, hopefully when all this is over, we need to look at the fact that people don't know what to trust and what to think, and it's causing things like the panic buying, it's causing anxiety, it's causing businesses to shut. It's causing people that think they're going to be insolvent to wrap up the businesses now.
Do you think that the media has fanned this whole coronavirus thing out of all proportion, and even to the extent that the markets have tanked, what, a third of their value? Incredible amount. Do you think that the media is largely responsible or not? Do you think that the response has been fair in terms of this is a genuine, this is something that we needed to handle?
It's a very serious situation when you have a new emerging, highly infectious, deadly disease that we know very little about. Especially when it spreads this quickly. It is a pandemic. It could be very similar to Spanish flu. You could look at 4% of the world's population wiped out, which is an awful lot of people. I know it sounds like.
Do you really think so? You really think so? Yeah. It's so hard to know at this stage, isn't it?
You look at if it has a re-emergence and keeps coming back, it might be 2 years before we actually build up adequate antibodies against different variants, or it goes into a variant that's no longer deadly. Like I say, with viruses, it is like rolling the dice.
This is the biggest problem, isn't it? It's the unknown. It is literally. I mean, I'm not saying I'm fearful personally, and I don't think people should be fearful. I do think it's a time to swallow a big old dollop of philosophy, though, and to pull together with your neighbours and all the rest of it. Hold on, Bubs. Hold on. Let me finish my point. But there is nonetheless a kind of a fear of the unknown. No.
Well, that's the problem. When you say with the media, I think that, there has been an awful lot of false news and all these sorts of things. But I think specifically when it comes down to something as important as the pandemic, there needs to be an official body that releases this information that we can trust. That we can trust. The one that I look at is the World Health Organization, and I'm not sure how I should.
They've been useless. They've been useless. I mean, again, they didn't say stop flights from Wuhan or from China, did they? They didn't say. I mean, I would have thought a couple of months ago, as far back as then, and some would probably say before then, there should have been all non-essential flights from the affected zones should have just been stopped.
Well, I think China should have taken a responsibility to say no one comes out, no one comes in.
But even the WHO didn't. The first thing the WHO did was set out some guidelines. The first thing the WHO did, Bubs, was set out a bunch of guidelines saying, oh, you mustn't say that you've been infected by whatever. You must say that you've contracted it, because if you say you've been infected, it sounds as though it's a slur against the Chinese. And you mustn't call it the Chinese flu. It was them that started that. It was the WHO, which has got bugger all to do with health. It's all about political correctness. Sorry.
Awful lot of these organizations, like the World Health Organization, like the UN, all of these sort of globalist organizations always have a cultural Marxist spin on everything, don't they? Rather than fulfilling their own roles. We see it in our own police, our social services here, our politicians here, and it's a global thing. It's happening with all of these globalized groups. That's why we have the UN and the World Health Organization. They've been hijacked completely to now have a more political agenda more than doing their jobs. That's why police don't arrest paedophiles. That's why the World Health Organization doesn't look after pandemics. It looks after, how we word things. And the police look after how we word things rather than actually doing their jobs. It's a global problem that speech seems to be a main priority of every single organization, and not causing offense rather than doing what the organization was originally, or what it's supposed to be purposed for. Like, or, for instance, either enforcing the law, which is no longer what the police do, or enforcing, and looking after the world's health and looking into pandemics. Now, I do think that the World Health Organization, and I've been saying this since, I think it was November or December, I started posting about how global migration poses a risk to global populations, human populations, especially with the environmental practices and the way that we live currently. A pandemic was pretty much imminent. This is why I am not 100% certain whether it is something that has been bioengineered. It's just that there are an awful lot of things that are highly, suspicious, or what you could call
convenient,
coincidental.
or convenient.
Convenient. Very convenient. I mean, such as the fact that you've got that Wuhan biosafety lab, the fact that the Americans said years before.
But what's the motive? What's the motive, Bubs? Going along that trajectory of that theory, if you like.
To look at it from a commercial point of view. Now, people think, oh, this is awful because the economies are failing. The economies failing don't affect the really rich people, right? Now, if you look at our GDP and what...
So this is a good excuse to what? To sink the economy, or...
No, to get rid of what they call useless eaters. Now, people that are sick and elderly, they don't really do anything that benefits the government. Quite often they don't pay tax. In fact, one of the biggest expenditures of this country is benefits, and the biggest expenditure of that is paying out pensions. Now, these people have surpassed their use in the eyes of the people that see them as useless eaters. So wouldn't a virus that kills off these particular groups of people be very convenient for them, especially when they're worried about the environmental impact of how many humans there are on the planet? Why do they want people that have an environmental impact, that are using up resources that are no use to them? Because at the end of the day, you are a product to your governments and to the people that rule these worlds. You are a product to them. You're nothing more than something that they own, and once you've surpassed your use, they want to get rid of you. Now, they can't do it blatantly, because obviously people won't like that very much, but it's very convenient that you get a virus that comes along and kind of wipes out the people that you prefer weren't there because they're an expense that has no value to you.
Okay, I want to just read a quote. I just want to read a quote, Bubs. And by the way, it was the same guy that coined the term useless eaters, Henry Kissinger, that said, today, this was off the back of the Rodney King riots in LA. And he said today, so back in the 80s, today Americans will be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will pledge with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. One world government, yeah? When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. Henry Kissinger delivered those remarks in an address to the Bilderberg meeting at Elvie, France, on the 21st of May, 1992.
Coincidental? Maybe? Do you not think so?
I mean, I think the guy is absolute scum, Kissinger. He was the guy that opened the door with China, by the way, when he took Nixon and started unifying these things so that we were basically trading with a communist party. Absolutely ridiculous. Completely flied in the face of what Reagan did with Russia and what have you. Anyway, look, let's take a few comments and see what people have got to say. And then we'll maybe get a little bit more into that and talk about some of the other conveniences, talking about some of the theories, which may or may not be correct, by the way. But yes, Kissinger did say that. Fact. Seymour Cox says, check here for snippets of information regarding this statement. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure that I trust the media, he says, but there is more unbiased sources relating to all this information all over the web. There is evidence, he says, about a Chinese bioresearcher who worked in Canada and was under investigation for spying and was kicked out and returned to China, I think. You guess where? It's most likely a lab-created virus. I did hear that. I thought that there was a professor that was arrested from, was it Harvard? A professor there that was working with a bunch of Chinese folks in that department that then subsequently returned to one of those laboratories in Wuhan. I read that in the mainstream media about 3 months ago now. I've no idea the truth of it. Paul Simon Case, I heard from an American historian. Oh, I've already read that comment. That was from a while ago. Michael Page, UN Agenda 2030. They want 95% of us dead. Thanks for that cheery comment, Michael. I know that those what are they? The thingy stones, for example, say that, and the Georgia Guide stones and all that. Carol Weston, older people like us challenge them, and they don't like it. Michael Page, pensions are not a benefit. People have paid in all their working life for this. And conveniently, they're not going to receive so much pension now, a lot of them. It's going to save the state a lot of money by the sounds of it. But then again, the other side of this argument is that it's also going to cost a lot of money to attack this, to try and prop up business. And we saw that, for example, what is it? The IMF put in 750 billion. And Britain 330. In the States, a trillion or something so far. But what is it? A couple of grand to each American and what have you. Just take some comments quickly from Facebook as well. Stephen Tannis Pullen says, "I think it's man-made. The government didn't go ape over SARS, did they?" Paul Fletcher. Hello, Mr. Fletcher. Good afternoon, sir. She's probably right about the useless eaters' final solution. Smacks of the chosen few who thought they were above the law. And Sue Dacey says, one of the many things I love about Trump, he says people are more important than the economy. Bubba, a lot of people reckon, or at least I've seen it mooted, that actually this whole operation, if you like, is contrived by Trump and the White Hats as a means to put people on a kind of a lockdown whilst they ring up all of these deep statists and start locking them up in a way that wouldn't induce civil war, perhaps. What are your thoughts about that? I have to say, I find that one a bit far-fetched personally, but
I've seen a few that are a bit far-fetched. I'm not sure what to think about that one, to be honest. You know, I would say that with the age of speculation and deception, sometimes things can go a little bit wild, but I don't like to rule any possibility out and say that it's completely impossible. Yeah. I think, from my opinion, you know, I do think that this is likely some sort of leak. I don't think it was intentional. So much. However, you know, if you were going to create something that was intentional, this would be one of the better viruses to use, you know, because I'm not sure what the mutate rate of this is. Influenza is completely uncontrollable in that regard, so you wouldn't want to weaponize that. Whereas SARS, they've had a few bits of practices of, and this is basically a form of SARS. So, I mean, it's going to be unclear of where the origins are, and if the origins are natural, then obviously we don't have to worry about what the intent of it was. And but if it has come about purposefully, you know, whether that's, you know, been targeted by, I mean, China's even been saying it's the US, and other people have been. I think people are Machiavellianists, are opportunists. They sit around, and there is always opportunity in a crisis, especially when people are confused and people are scared. They don't think straight. Psychopaths don't have that problem, so they can think very, very clearly. So they're very able and capable of manipulating people, even people in power. So you'll find that there'll be people that sit behind people in power and and manipulate them into certain decisions. And those decisions are usually ones of eroding people's civil liberties and rights, and being able to utilize powers or abuse powers to be able to take away people or silence people that may cause a problem for your power supremacy or your gains in one way or another. So yeah, they can be utilized in that way. I don't think that necessarily that was the whole intent of the virus. I think when I look at how people, if they were evil and they had an awful lot of power and had to govern an awful lot of people, how they think, because they would have to cut off all, not necessarily evil, but they would have to cut off most of their emotional balances and look at things just purely in a rational manner. And if you thought that the world's resources were becoming more limited, and you were thinking that the environment is becoming affected by the dense populations of humans, and especially with the rise of AI technologies, it's not like you need all those serfs anymore. So it would make sense for them to release viruses to decrease populations of people that are of lesser value in their eyes. That's why I think it is, because it is commercial, and I know how.
You sound like Prince Philip. Sorry.
Well, yeah, he said he likes to come back when he dies.
Or David Attenborough. Isn't he similarly minded? Okay, let me ask you about psychopathy, sociopathy, because it seems to me that the whole world is run by these people for the simple reason that these people have an advantage. They have no empathy, so they don't care who they tread on to get to the top. They don't have any qualms about it whatsoever. Can we trust Mr. Trump? Can we trust Boris Johnson? I don't think we can trust Macron. I think that's very obvious from what we've seen on the streets over the course of months and months and months. And by the way, that's another good example of why we can't trust the media, because they're radio silence about what's been going on in France. Near as damn it. I don't think we can trust Merkel, whatever she is, because, I mean, look at what she's done. She's devastated Europe with this Coudenhove-Kalergi type lurgy. But what about Trump, though? I mean, he's come in on a soapbox of draining the swamp, and it all sounds great. And Boris, similarly, that he's going to deliver Brexit and get it done and all the rest of it, and it sounds great. But could that all just be... Let me finish the question. Could that just be a giant foil?
Not really. I think you can get some people... The world of mental health and diagnoses of such, and people's speculation about what people are or what sort of category they fit into, and especially around sociopathy and psychopathy, especially with how the media and film portray it, I think people vastly misunderstand it. There'll be an awful lot of people that are sociopaths out there that really don't even recognize it. I would actually class the majority of society as slightly sociopathic due to their selective compassion and lack of empathy for certain sections of society.
Apparently, it's very common.
Pretending, that they're all moral and they care, but most people deep down, once you scratch the surface, they only care about things that will benefit them and people that benefit them in some manner. And I don't mean always emotionally.
Getting their bog roll.
It could be emotionally or whatever. But yeah, I think you can get people that are, let's say they lack a certain emotional range that other people do. And some people are born like that. Other people acquire it due to life experience. However, not all these people have evil intentions. I mean, for instance, I don't really feel guilt, but I don't do many things that I should feel guilty about. The only times I feel guilty is like when I walk past a homeless person that I can see that is super suffering, and I really don't have any change to give them, and things like that, because I just don't like to see that level of lack of dignity imposed on a human, and that level of suffering. And when I can't do anything about it, that gets to me. But my day-to-day life and my actions and things, I do very rarely do things that I feel guilty about. Now, I think this might, and then there are proper psychopaths out there, for instance, right, that really don't care, and they are sadistic. They like other people's suffering. You can get sociopaths that don't really feel fear, they don't really feel guilt, they don't really feel certain things, but they don't really have bad intentions. In fact, because they kind of understand how the sadistic ones think to some level, but without having that sadism, they're better at combating that evil than the others are, because they can rationalize exactly how these people think. And they're very rare in some ways, the ones that are what I would say highly intelligent and capable full-on psychopaths. But most of them, if they are highly intelligent, if they're articulate, if they are sort of, the people can connect to them on some level, then yeah, they can very easily get to positions of power, and power is something they quite regularly seek. So CEOs, I mean, you get an awful lot of
do you personally trust Trump and Boris?
My trust of anybody is pretty minimal, to be fair. But, my trust with Trump started to be questioned where just after he got inaugurated, actually, and he went to Saudi Arabia and was shaking hands with them and some of the things that he's done. However, I think he's a much better option than everything else that's been available for America.
That's not difficult, though.
And I think due to his independent wealth, and because qualities that some people see as negative but are very much required, there is a certain level of narcissism and egocentrism, and he's not going to follow anybody else's rules. He's not going to be controlled, because of his independent wealth. He doesn't have that pressure on himself. And I think that he possibly realizes as well that you don't die with all these nice flash toys that you've acquired in your life. You don't get to take your bank balance with you. You don't get to take your titles with you when you die. But, the only thing that you truly leave, he'll leave all that to his kids. But if you really want to make your mark on the planet and be remembered, he's now going to be remembered very well for what he's done. But if he does something that's truly exceptional while he is president,
like drain the swamp, and he is beginning to, by the looks of it. It has to be said. Yeah. Attorney General Barr is making moves on Hunter Biden, for example. By the looks of it, there are things that are moving along in that direction, I think, but. He has been held back. It has to be said. In fact, I just want to say this as a bit of a caveat to my big quote, because I don't trust any politician, because I just don't trust any politician. Too long in the tooth to trust any of them. However, it does seem to me, I would say this, that Donald Trump, he's been held back. He's had one arm tied behind his back with that whole Mueller thing and then the impeachment thing, and he has done a lot to tackle human trafficking, for example, and he's created a hell of a lot of jobs. So he has pretty much done what he said he would do on that soapbox, and he hasn't started. He hasn't started any wars.
He hasn't. These are the reasons why I sort of like. I do trust Trump to a certain level. I understand that he's got to have some international diplomacy, and there are legacies of things and agreements and legislation and treaties that he's been made up by previous administrations that he's got to sort of adhere to, because there are protocols and rules and laws and that sort of thing. And I think he just tries to abide by them as much as he can, as long as it's not complete bureaucracy and red tape that he just thinks is ridiculous. But one thing you get with his particular personality group, the ENTJs, the same group as Margaret Thatcher, is if they say that they're going to do something, they're going to do it. And they're very rarely deceptive people. They will blatantly say things and display opinions that they know are going to be unpopular or people may not like or may cause some controversy. And they're not saying it for shock value. They truly mean it. And usually they have good reason to. It's like when Trump said, "I'm going to build a wall." He's done a good job of that. When he said, "I'm going to make America great again," I think he's done a good job of that.
Apparently Mexico now is taking over building the wall because they don't want Americans jumping over, bringing coronavirus with them. And I don't know the truth of that. Maybe that story is fake too.
He's going to make the Mexicans pay for it.
Well, that's what he said. Before we go, I want to ask you, former UKIP NEC member Katie Fanning, Bubba Kate Paris, please, what you think of what's going to happen now. Is there any possibility that Brexit could be delayed? People have been saying, just to say quickly, people have been saying, "Oh, Brexit's done. Brexit's done." No. We paid out 30 billion quid for nothing. That's what's happened. Oh, we did set up some things, but until we're out of the ECJ, the CU, and the SM, there ain't no Brexit. But will that happen as Boris has promised in December?
Apparently, I did read a story from the Telegraph, and I know I say you shouldn't trust the mainstream media, but the Telegraph seemed to be reasonably reasonable. In their content, it seems to be verified or to some extent true, especially when it's regarding the Conservative Party. And they printed one a day ago saying that Boris is refusing to rule out an extension. But, I got a bit of a backlash on that particular post where people saying he has on multiple times, and he did in his speech today. Guys, I tend to not watch the news. It just gets me angry. And whilst it's all repetitive coronavirus fear mongering, I'm not going to watch that bollocks. I have better things to do. But yeah, I do think that it's I've lost track of where we were there because I saw
all right.
it and then
Barnier has got coronavirus now. I just think they will do everything they can to stop Brexit, including all the negotiating team come down with corona. They're probably injecting themselves with it. They're probably, walking around Chinese ratty-batty supermarkets. I don't know. But
they'll be going
it
on
seems to
public
me...
transport on the rails. But quite a lot of these people, I know it's not the politicians that do the negotiations. Most of it's going to be done with their staff and civil servants. But, I can see, I know they could do a lot of this through video links, but if people are seriously sick, and imagine due to the seniority of that role, that quite a lot of the people that are going to be conducted in those roles may be of an advanced age. Quite a lot of the EU leaders. Could you imagine Jean-Claude Juncker surviving coronavirus? I can't. He looks like he was half dead last time I saw him on any camera.
That's right.
So, I think if it has the biggest impact that we're thinking of, I think that it's going to be extended. It's inevitable. Whitehall's going to have a lot more to deal with. Boris is going to have a lot more to deal with. I think that the EU will definitely use it as an excuse to prolong these negotiations because they don't want us leaving, because the longer we don't leave, it's like we will end up giving them more money and they'll come up with excuses. I believe there's a treaty that comes into force in 2022 that basically would make us stay forever and all these things. There's lots of conspiracies around it. I think we will be leaving, but I think there is a possibility of that negotiation period on what terms, because apparently we've
I'll tell you what, I'm so glad we got rid of that last parliament and that John Burke bloke, that speaker. At least with this parliament we've got a good chance, and well, let me ask you from another point of view then, do you think the EU will survive this coronavirus crisis?
Economically, I very much doubt it. They were on the brink anyway. Germany's not been doing that well. Most of the other countries in the EU have been propped up by the richer nations such as ourselves. France isn't doing so well now. Germany, which was basically their financial backbone along with Britain, is
which was teetering on the brink of recession for years before this.
It's possible that, a more favourable trade deal may come about from this for Great Britain due to the economic need of Europe to continue trade with its biggest customer. So it's not like they were going to want a no deal if they're in an economic recession, if their people are really struggling, if businesses have been seriously affected and they're trying to recover from that. Not having any trade with what was their previous biggest customer is going to seriously hinder that progress and that recovery from the economic downfall that is inevitable from this COVID pandemic that we're facing now.
Okay, God bless you. Thank you very much indeed, Bubba Kate Paris. Bubba Kate Paris, God bless you. Thank you very much indeed. And please, let's do this again soon because, you know what? I'm in quarantine. Before you know it, you're going to be in quarantine and we ain't got nothing better to do, darling.
Of course. If I'm stuck in for the next 2 weeks, which I think I might have to do, I'll just check with my G. Oh, yeah, is my GP open tomorrow? I'll ring
Just
my
check
GP
with your
and
cat.
check and say, do I have to stay in?
All you have to do is check with your cat. Check with your dog, whatever. Is it all right? Can I do a stream?
Oh, she's gone to sleep now near my feet, but she was meowing to get in halfway through, and I felt a bit guilty locking her out the office, but then she was trying to climb all over everything, so I had to get her. Anyway, I'm going to go feed her and feed myself and get a glass of wine. It's been a stressful day.
Good idea. I'm going to get a beer. God
See
bless
you
you.
soon, Molly. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bubs. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I leave?
I'll deal with that. I'll deal with that. She doesn't know how to turn that off. That's all right. Neither do I.
I did. I pressed the button
so
that said leave, but I'm still here.
Okay. Right. Oh, for goodness sake. I'll deal with that. I'll deal with that. God bless you. Okay. Cheerio. Thanks, Bubs. Lots of love to you. Oh, no, hold on a sec. How do I kick her off?
Why can I not even find the app now?
Oh, I didn't have to do it. You'll have to wait. Right, that's been Daily Chaos. It's every day now. Every day at 5 o'clock GMT, 6 o'clock CET. That's 1 o'clock in the afternoon if you're in Washington, D.C., Mr. President. Come on and tell us what you're going to do to sort this out. Tell us what you're going to do to drain the swamp. I don't know what happened to Jay Carey. He called in. He didn't say a thing. He's just been on mute all the time. Absolutely useless. You're very welcome to call into this show, yeah? Please share it if you haven't done so yet. Or even if you have, please share it again. Share it to groups, yeah? Annoy Nick Clegg today. Subscribe, all that. Like it. Send me whiskey. Send me bog rolls. Yeah, toilet rolls. That'd be nice. I can sell them on the corner. I can't because I'm not allowed out. I'll get arrested. Right, okay, there you go. That's your lot. Oh, I'll see you tomorrow. Who's on tomorrow? Dennis Spain from Hawaii. Telling us about, I don't know, surfing and, Hawaii 5-0 or something. Catch you later. God bless you. Ciao, ciao. Cheers. Oh, hold on. There you go. That's it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Oh, blimey. So many.